Hello, and thank you for joining us today in our study of First Thessalonians. Actually, thank you for joining us, period. I know that we have been out for quite some time. There's been a lot of life changes that have gone on in my family. And for my family, we have moved not just down the road, but to a different state. I've taken on a different job, and a lot of these things have kind of coalesced together to make it impossible for the last several weeks for us to be able to continue our studies. And so some of those things are starting to level out. There's still a few things that are going to be uh, things to get wrinkled out over the course of the next few days. But I wanted to go ahead and somewhat get started in our next study through the books of the Thessalonians. So today, what I want us to do is I want us to take just a couple of minutes, like we've done with our other New Testament studies recently, and just spend a little bit of time examining some background to this first letter to the brethren in Thessalonica. Now, the first thing I want us to look at is Thessalonica itself. Uh, the city was one of the chief cities. It was one of the great cities of Greece in the times of the first century Roman Empire. It was the capital of the region of Macedonia. It is going to be a location where the Apostle Paul is going to visit on his missionary journeys, and the city still exists today. As a matter of fact, it's a very large city still today. In modern Greece, it is known as Saloniki and or Thessaloniki. And so you have this city that still exists today that is being written to in the days of the first century, and the church there that is going to be established is going to be written to in two letters, not just one. But this first letter is going to be written by the Apostle Paul to the members of the church in Thessalonica. And if you recall from Acts chapter 17, Paul is going to spend some time in Thessalonica. We most often recall his trip from Thessalonica to Berea because in verse 11 of chapter 17 we often talk about how that the Bereans were more noble, it was said, than those of Thessalonica, in that they searched the scriptures daily to see whether the things they were being told are true. In Thessalonica, what Paul ran into was the Jews didn't want him to stay there. And so there was a lot of success that they had. They established a church in Thessalonica. They were able to get things off the ground, so to speak, but they're going to have to leave before too long due to the reactions of the Jews in that particular city. And you see that in the first several verses of Acts chapter 17. So when was this letter to the Thessalonians written? We know that it comes after the events of Acts chapter 17, but where does the time frame fall? You notice that with many of the other books that we've looked at so far, especially Ephesians, Philippians, and Colossians, you have these being prison letters that are written about 62 to 63 AD. Well, First Thessalonians is going to come actually more than a decade before that. Most will place the book of First Thessalonians somewhere in the 50 to 55 AD range. And so you've got a time period anywhere from 8 to 12 years before the times of the writing of Ephesians, Philippians, and Colossians. This is going to be shortly after Paul is going to leave Thessalonica. And so likely around the time we would consider of Acts 18, possibly as late as Acts 19, but likely not. But you have this time period in here where the Apostle Paul is writing back to these young Christians about some things, and specifically some things that they're concerned about. As a matter of fact, when you start looking at what the letter itself is designed to do, it's meant to alleviate some of their fears. In the first couple chapters of First Thessalonians, he's going to talk about his appreciation for them and the things that they're doing right and the things that they're working toward in their service to God. But then you're also going to have, at the end of the letter, this discussion of what they're supposed to be looking forward to, and specifically in regards to the second coming of Christ and the resurrection and things of that nature. And this discussion is actually going to bleed over into Second Thessalonians as well. There's going to be this follow-up letter shortly thereafter where Paul is going to explain a few more things in regard to this. But especially in First Thessalonians chapters 4 and 5, there's going to be an emphasis on the second coming of Christ, what that entails, what it is that they should be expecting, what it is that they shouldn't be expecting, and how it is they're supposed to live their lives in view of that. And so Paul is going to write to them not because there's any major doctrinal error that necessarily that they're dealing with, and not because they're in some sort of situation like you have in some books of the New Testament where people are falling off into ungodliness and various other things. This is simply a young congregation of God's people that is still growing in their knowledge and in their understanding, and there's some things they don't understand yet. Which also means it becomes a very good book for us to study as well, as we seek to grow in our knowledge and understanding of what God has to say and what his expectations of us are. So as we go through our study of First Thessalonians, we're going to be talking about a letter to a group of young Christians. And it's going to deal with things that are levels of uncertainty for them, but it's also going to illustrate that people can have the right desire. People can have the desire to do what's right. They can be doing everything they can to be living the way that they should, and still have things that they don't understand, and still have things that they need to learn about and to come to a specific knowledge of in order to be fully prepared and fully equipped to face various questions and to deal with certain scenarios in their lives. And that's what we find in the letter of First Thessalonians. So I hope that you'll join me again next time, and we're going to try to not make it very long before we jump in and begin examining First Thessalonians chapter 1. Thank you so much for sticking with us through the studies, and thank you for all of you who are so excited for us to continue the studies and have been sending in various thoughts and encouragements as we prepare to continue our studies in the midst of all the craziness that our family has been going through. But we look forward to next time as we look at 1 Thessalonians chapter 1. Until then, I hope you have a great day.